Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Tales from the Fandom. We're a little bit about a week out from Halloween, and I am joined by returning guest Victoria, aka the Fandom Pirate, aka Cosplay Spooky on Instagram. And you might have heard her in the background going, ooh, 'cause we're here to talk all about horror movies because we couldn't fit all of it in on her original episode. Welcome back, Victoria.
It's great to be back. It's great to be spooky and scary once again.
I know. We're recording this way ahead of October, so just if you're listening and we reference stuff, just know that we did it ahead of time. So we don't know if Halloween is canceled, which might be the scariest thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, and if you're like me, Halloween's a year-round event. You know, it's completely appropriate to be scared in July at this moment. So here we go.
Here we go. We are literally living in a horror movie right now.
Yeah, I'd say we're about. I think a lot of us feel like Brad Pitt's character in World War Z. That sort of just the standing in the middle of the pandemic, wondering, "Wow, where's the Pepsi machine?"
It's been interesting pandemic wise from hearing the celebrities that said, oh, I'm going on a retreat for a month where there's no technology and no outside influences. And they come back and they're like, what do you mean there's all this stuff going on? Well, and it just reminds me of like The Walking Dead or 28 Days Later, where somebody's waking up and it's like, what have I woken up to?
Oh, especially just like that 28 Days Later feel of just like, I was driving down, when the quarantine first hit, I was driving down our main street, which is our grocery store, and you just see stores, streets, neighborhoods just completely decimated, and you start thinking, okay, when is the horde going to start showing up, you know? Because 28 Days Later has the most terrifying zombies, in my personal opinion, because their rate of infection is so quick, and they're so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like compared to like Day of the Dead, like lumbering zombies.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I remember when 28 Days Later came out, and like it had that balance of scary movie. Like I want to say that I watched it. Okay. I watched this movie. I really loved how they did have, because it's almost like one of those first times where you had fast moving zombies. They weren't just like the lumbering brains. Like these are like,
it was a move from
fast.
George Romero's it was a move away from the Romero zombie, but also this was, I believe 28 Days Later is your first survivalist horror movie where you get the idea of like, oh, we're gonna go pillage, you know, we're gonna go through the grocery stores, we're gonna go through cities, we're gonna go through we're not all just kind of holed up in a farmhouse, you know, shooting stragglers. And that really paved the way for movies like World War Z, like another really good one was what was it called? Have you seen 28 Weeks Later?
I have not. I've not seen that one.
Okay, that one was a little bit more, I guess you could say, radical. Like it was like more crazy, I feel. Just the way that you see this infection spreading at an even more quicker rate, because it was decimated at first, and then just like one bad contact with an infected person just started it all up again.
See, now I'm gonna have to watch it, because I wanted to say about 28 Days Later, I loved their like style of shooting the movie, how they were like, okay, we only have 2 minutes to get your shot before people start actually coming out into London, or getting this shot at like sunrise, and if we don't get it, then we're not getting it at all. And like I loved the combination of that type of filmmaking with fast zombie people.
Oh yeah 28 Days Later also has a beautiful score, like the slow piano riff that kind of like slows in as it coming in shots on London. And I think a lot of the times you see a lot of that sort of influence, the fast moving scary zombies in video games too. Like I think a lot of Left 4 Dead mostly.
Yeah. Left 4 Dead. There's also a zombie game I thought that I saw what had come out where it was like you've got to do like stuff with the environment, like shooting barrels down so they like
Is
block your
Dead Island?
way. Maybe. I'm not certain.
Yeah, it
I don't
might have been Dead Island, but that was a very short-lived IP. Like I heard people talking about it like the year it came out and never again. I feel like that's a lot of zombie titles because remember everybody was crazy about Call of Duty Zombies for like ever.
Yep, that and there's like I think there's zombies in Red Dead Redemption. They did a
Yeah,
zombie
that was a
spin-off.
DLC, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, that was a DLC. There was an entire year when The Walking Dead first came out. There was zombie media everywhere. Like, I don't know if it counts as horror, but there was a zombie romance called Warm Bodies.
I've watched that.
I love that movie, mostly because like when I saw it, I was a weird teeny bopper. I was like, "Oh, it's so romantic. He's dead." You don't think about like the ramifications of it, but there was a very good short show, again horror themed, on the BBC called In the Flesh, where it deals with rehabilitating zombies after their horrible experience crawling out of the grave, which kind of gives you the idea that we have a lot of modern media deals with the fact of the rehabilitated monster. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that? Like, you have like another big one you want to talk about is Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
Oh, I love Hannibal Lecter. I'm kind of sick of Silence of the Lambs. I can't watch it anymore because I wrote a 20-page paper on it in college. So I don't really, I can't really sit through it a second time. But I have been watching the Hannibal series on Netflix.
Okay, yeah, it just came to Netflix. So
yes, it's wonderful, and I really like this idea of the cool, calculated murderer. You know, you have someone who's poised, prestiged, and it's such a big contrast from like the kind of flip side archetype you have in people like Michael Myers and kind of Jason Voorhees. You know, like the reserved sort of psychopath.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I remember watching Silence of the Lambs probably in college, and Red Dragon, and I think there's a sequel to Silence of the Lambs.
There is
blanking on the name.
There is a film Hannibal.
That's okay.
Yeah, there is the film Hannibal where I believe that's the one where he has the guy, like he sawed the top of the guy's head off and he's just like, "Here, eat your brain," and the dude's like, "Sure, tastes great."
I think that's the one.
Yes. That's a great piece of media. But I really enjoyed that one too.
So we are going to talk horror, mostly horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
Games, TV shows. I'm sure like it'll all filter in as it already has, and that's cool.
Yeah.
Now we were talking before on the podcast, and we started going all over the place on horror movies and like the horror subgenres, like horror sci-fi movies and horror comedy movies. And can you call certain movies horror movies, or are they something else entirely? And so I want to explore everything.
Yes.
But I did kind of prep I can't really say I prepped myself because I didn't watch a lot of horror movies ahead of time. I did watch Aliens, and I guess we'll start there, and we'll start there, and then we'll dive into stuff. I watched Aliens at a traumatic age when I was younger, and there's only certain parts that I remembered. And watching Aliens back, I didn't realize how much I had forgotten, like that I had blanked out, because my mind was so focused on one scene where it's Newt, who's the little girl, and she's covered in the slime. Basically, like the last 20 minutes is the only thing my mind remembered from the movie. And where Ripley fights with the yellow like loading machine with the queen, and then like yay, they win, and they go off into hypersleep.
Yeah.
And so I sent you a message, and I was like, "Oh yeah, aliens," and you had said something like, "The xenomorph is the scariest movie monster."
Yeah, I honestly, I truly believe that, because when you think of the xenomorph from start to end, this monster has a terrifying life cycle. Like you see them, the concept of the face huggers alone, it's just absolutely terrifying. And that's another thing they kind of explore a little bit better in later movies in the Alien franchise with Prometheus.
Hmm.
Have you seen that one?
I have. Yep.
Yes, I've seen Prometheus. I've seen everything except Alien 3, because I saw the development sort of nightmare of that, and I decided to take that off my list.
Well, I'm shocked that you're saying that you didn't say Alien 3. Did you see Alien Resurrection?
Yeah, I saw Alien Resurrection because I love Winona Ryder. So
Okay.
I was obligated. But other than that, I truly believe like the xenomorph is this terrifying creature because it's rooted in humanity in a sense. It has the genesis of being. A lot of the times I look at Alien as an intergenerational critique. It's this fear of what comes after us when we're gone. The idea that there are apex predators that not only come from us, but they're better than us. And you compare this to things like the predator, who we have no idea where the predator came from. We have no idea, what their culture is like. And you compare it to the xenomorph, where we see its life cycle before our very eyes. And we realize that the xenomorph is just as much a part of us as we are a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes the xenomorph so terrifying is the fact that, and not to be weird, it is an inherently kind of sexual aspect of it, of the whole reproductive life cycle of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I think I'd read articles about that even before like the rewatch like years ago, about how it's just like so terrifying because the face hugger is like, on your face doing things.
Yeah.
Implanting things in you,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter who you are, like
Mm-hmm.
it's doing it.
Well, it's also like, I feel like a big part of horror, and this is completely divergent from like the psychological thriller genre of the movies, but horror is the sense of powerlessness. I feel like the biggest sort of theme you can play with in horror movies is the sense that you don't have control. And I think that's kind of a lot where Exorcist movies
Mm-hmm.
get their bread and butter, because I remember a lot of the times, and I was actually quite upset. My younger sister recently watched the original Exorcist movie, and she said it was like cheesy. She's like, "Oh, this is lame." Da 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 da. I'm like, "Well, my grandmother saw that in theaters, and she ran out crying." Like the whole green pea soup vomiting and like the head turning
Mm-hmm.
around backwards.
Yep. I remember when I watched it, I found it boring. It just
Really?
it plodded along, like, and I totally I can see where people of the generation before me, so like my parents, or like the maybe people that are 5 or 10 years older than me,
Mhm.
where that would be scary,
Yeah.
and that would be something because of everything that they did for the movie, and because I feel like in the time that it was released, maybe more people were going to church than they are
Yeah.
maybe now. And of course, with the movies now, it's you, and I'd snap my fingers a whole bunch of times, so just imagine me doing that, of like you needing to be quick and fast and having
Yeah.
these like these action beats to keep people's attention.
Yeah, I think audience members have shorter attention spans. Also, like I miss the kind of subtle nature of older horror movies, like Rosemary's Baby. Like the idea that she's just like, oh, what have you done to its eyes? What have you done to its eyes? Just like the fear of the unknown and what you
Hmm.
can't see. Like I actually just watched this movie. It's been on my list for a while. I watched it last night, called Don't Breathe.
Ooh, yes,
Mm.
I did watch that recently, like not
Yes.
recently, like within the past year.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I noticed another big thing that's kind of coming out that's new in the horror genre is this sort of like sensory deprivation activist. You have don't breathe, which is don't make any noises. Then you have a quiet place, which I find kind of terrifying because I never shut up. So I found that one kind of terrifying. Hush is another really good one where that sort of like the sensory deprivation of it. It's have you heard of that one? It's on Netflix.
If it came out back in like late '90s, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Oh yeah. This one's a little later. It's a deaf lady living by herself, and of course, some fine gentleman decides to rob her. So it's kind of like that same sort of concept. And then you have movies like Bird Box.
Yep.
Yeah, Bird Box was really interesting in the way that it again it takes away your senses, your sense of sight. And I would even argue that Gravity kind of does that a little well too.
I have not seen that one.
Gravity's really cool. Just this idea, and again, I really think Alien paved the way for movies like that. Is like I feel like Alien was the first time we saw space in a negative light. Because before then you had Star Trek where it's like, let's go on an adventure, guys. Like, let's not worry about it. It's the idea of like weaponizing the foreign ground. You know, space, no one can hear you scream.
Yep. And see, like when I was watching Aliens, I watched Aliens because I needed something more fast paced while I was working. But my go-to out of that franchise is Alien, because I feel like, and you know, going back to the xenomorph is the best movie monster that you're saying. I think Alien, I loved what they did with Alien because you don't really see it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's always like on the periphery, and then the reveal is cool, and
Yeah.
I like that, and it's like, okay, that's awesome. And Aliens carried it over, and now you're in this environment where it's not just one of them, it is
Several of them.
like several like to hundreds of them. And you're like, dang, that's really cool. I think though, when it came to Aliens, at a certain point there was a time where I was watching it and I was like, ooh, like, and I was like, ooh, that started to get a little bit cheesy with how they were, not with how they were moving, but like how one of them at a certain point like did a move, and you were like, oh, that's man in suit right there.
Yeah.
and then it just it got worse because I watched Alien 3 and I finished that this morning. And Alien 3 was definitely where they started using a lot of CGI-ish helpers, and it paid no benefit.
Yeah, I think Alien Resurrection, that's close to the 2000s, isn't it?
Yes, late. I think it's either late 90s or like right on the 2001 mark.
Because that's like when like you started seeing like, the only way I can describe the CGI is like Backstreet Boy like music video level like CGI. It looks something like that. Like, that's another like really big debate within the horror community, is the use of CGI versus practical effects. Because like when you look at The Thing, especially 1982 version of The Thing, like this is, a lot of it does, like, I feel like you can kind of see between the cracks of like, oh, this piece of flesh kind of looks like a piece of bubblegum pulled too far. But it's just, I guess, like, I don't know how to describe it. The practical effects in that movie are so visceral and disgusting. Like, you can't help but feel a little bit disgusted. It's the same thing with another really good, I guess, space horror movie, Event Horizon.
Oh, I've heard that's really good.
Oh my gosh, I had to actually take a break from that one. Yeah, that one's very, 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 very bloody and gory. Actually, Event Horizon really was a big inspiration for Dead Space. If you ever played Dead Space.
I've seen people play it on Twitch. I cannot play. they're like, just like watching horror movies. I can't play horror games. My wife and I have a horror game that we really want to play, but we haven't sat down to play it, which is Until Dawn.
Ooh, Until Dawn's fun.
So I mean, Well, we'll eventually play it. I bought it like 4 years ago, and it's still unplayed.
Yeah, that Until Dawn's a very interesting game in the fact that that was really a big hallmarker for the whole facial recognition software aspect of it. That's like spot on, really good.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, okay, so Xenomorph, hands down, your number one like movie monster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who's your, on the flip side, like who would you put on like your number one like horror movie bad guy or girl or
That is really hard because there's so many. I am under the impression that Jason Voorhees is actually a good person. Like, well, not a good not a good person. I feel like he's misunderstood.
Okay.
Because because in the 80s you notice you have like this, I have this theory that a lot of the movies in the 80s revolve around the fact that they're just massacring teenagers because this is a few years after the whole satanic panic aspect of the idea that we're kind of so afraid of the youth that we're going to create big movie monsters to beat them into submission to acting right, you know? And I really think that Jason Voorhees is this figure that comes from that idea that, you know, the youth are too crazy and too outlandish to really be trusted. Because you think about him and he's kind of controlled by his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of living in this constant state of pleasing that older generation. And you see this again you see it a lot in Freddy too. The fact that we need to just punish teenagers constantly.
Well, wasn't it the teenager's parents' fault to begin with Freddy? Like, didn't they like lock him in a house and burn him?
Okay, but that was Freddy's fault.
I guess.
Freddy should have probably been following the rules a little bit more. But if I were to say my favorite horror movie protagonist, it would probably be Pinhead, or as he prefers to be called, Hell Priest.
Okay.
I think he's just decadent because just this, again, like, it's the regal psychopath, somebody who gets off on the idea of just being horrible but badass in the same way. yeah, and they're actually remaking Hellraiser pretty soon.
I heard that.
Yes, a female Pinhead, which is interesting because in the book, the main Cenobite, well, I guess you could call him Pinhead, was supposed to be like the gender was supposed to be ambiguous, really.
Okay.
So it'll be really interesting to see where they go for that.
I will say, like, I mean, I dabbled when I was in my teenage years with maybe a movie of Friday the 13th, or maybe Nightmare Before Elm Street, but Hellraiser was one that I didn't really go to. I'd catch it on like the randomest channels, and it'd be edited, but I still was like, you know, I'm not down with the person that has the pins in his head.
That's fair, because a lot of the times, Hellraiser is a very sadistic series. It gets off on the idea that people just seek pain. You know, and it's the whole BDSM culture of just like, we're gonna show up to your house dressed in all leather and torture you. Like, it's very, very interesting, especially given the fact that the Cenobites themselves are brought on. Like, you have to seek them out for them to really show up. But Hellraiser is especially one of my favorites.
That's an interesting concept, that you have to seek them out for them to come to then bring you pain.
Yeah. And the thing is because a lot of the times the thing with Hellraiser is it's the mortal experience of physical torture. Hellraiser is grounded in the idea that you are never, like, living is pain. It's such a dark, horrible concept, but it's also brilliant in the way that it explores concepts of both religion, philosophy, and the physicality of life. And that's at least what I took from at least the first movie. I'll admit, like later down the line, we got a little cheesy because you have to remember Hellraiser was coming out in a time where the horror protagonist was supposed to be quippy and funny, and that's Freddy's fault too. So this podcast is like literally going to be turning into Freddy Krueger did bad. That
Freddy
like
Krueger did bad amongst not only his in his series but others as well.
yeah, because Doug Bradley, like when they initially cast him, they're like, "Can you do like the funny quip stuff like Chucky and Freddy?" And he's like, "I'd rather not." and and so like he was kind of he kind of made the character his own in the fact that he isn't necessarily a goofball.
Mm-hmm.
And like, don't get me wrong, there's completely a place for that in horror movies, like the sort of the funny, wisecracking, I guess you could say butthead. Like you have, like I said, Chucky, Freddy. I don't know if this counts as a horror movie, but it freaked me out when I was little. The Gingerbread Man.
I don't think okay. Here's my backstory on a lot of horror movies that I remember is that I remember putting the videotapes away at Blockbuster Video and seeing that like the video box art for it, but I again didn't watch it.
But I love a part of me loves dumb horror movies. Like the Gingerbread Man is about this. It's basically Chucky, but a gingerbread man. Like he gets murdered in a gingerbread man factory, and his blood gets baked into a cookie, and he's like really angry about it, and and he comes back to harass everyone. And then you have the Leprechaun series, which I personally adore because I think they're hilarious. I think there is a place in the horror genre for the horror comedy.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, without horror comedy, we wouldn't have like one of my first franchises of horror that I kind of got into was Scream, because it's horror, but then you've got like the whole comedy stuff that's going on along with it. Like I remember going and watching it multiple times because is like one of my first high school newspaper movie reviews.
Oh wow!
And
Cool.
I was like writing down like how many times Ghostface was tripping over things, like because that was a whole thing in that movie is how many times are they just going to like trip over anything and everything when they're chasing people.
Well, the great thing about the first Scream is that it really kind of pokes fun at the horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was the first one to be really meta about it, really self-aware.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Especially the character of Billy Loomis, who's just like the embodiment of the horror nerd gone wrong.
Here are the rules for all your horror movies.
I'm sorry?
I said, here are the rules for all your horror movies.
Here are all the rules for all your horror movies, and this is why they suck. Like, even a lot of the times also the thing that Scream kind of critiqued in a way is the concept of the final girl. You notice in every horror movie, the one that survives, and this is even just last night with Don't Breathe, is the girl. The chick is always the last one standing.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a lot of literature about this as well. There's a lot of writers who've commented on the fact that every movie is somehow feminist because we always have the female sort of protagonist living in the end. Especially a good example of this would be Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Sally's sort of Sally's the last one to live and sort of the last one to make it out alive. And of course you have, I would argue, like the most beloved final girl would have to be Laurie Strode from Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's because people just love Jamie Lee Curtis or if it's because she's really a good character. That sounds like heresy. That sounds so mean, but I do wonder sometimes if Jamie Lee Curtis kind of painted her as that sort of favorite character among so many people.
It is something, and I noticed it in at least probably within the past 6 months. There's a lot of stuff on Twitter about like the final girl and how like it was being taken in a way of, maybe you need to not look at it as as like this thing, like the feminist type thing, um and that you really need to step away from like the final, like no one wants to be the final girl. Like, oh, you know what it was from? It was from Lock and Key
I need
on
to watch
Netflix.
that.
They had there's a thing that's going on, and one of the kids is like, no one wants to be the final girl. Like, they don't want to be any girl. They don't want to be in this situation to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, don't start putting them on that pedestal of, oh yeah, final girl, so great. Like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, well, also, like, a lot of the times the final girl, well, if we're going to call her that, she's in a position where she sees stuff going wrong and no one's listening to her. Ripley, an alien.
Yep.
I don't think we should go out there. Like, I don't think we should go Prometheus. I don't think we should go to the unnamed planet without our helmets on. Texas Chainsaw. Hey, maybe we shouldn't stop at this random stranger's house. Let's keep driving and not pick up the hitchhiker. Friday the 13th. I don't want to go camping here. It's just a repeat offense of the final girl is the voice of reason who isn't heeded to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I can definitely see where we should really stop putting them on this pedestal of, I guess, grandeur, if that's the correct word for it. But, yeah. I guess it doesn't always pay to be the voice of reason. Especially not for poor Ripley. Oh my goodness. I feel so sorry for Ripley.
I watched Aliens and Aliens 3, and I was really thinking about like how horror movies in general seem to have like these badass women like coming out of them, and that's like one of the things that has been around for a long time. Not even like with Alien, but I think it's like what Last House on the Left is another one where it's like the woman. I Spit on Your Grave, like where these women like go through all this traumatic stuff only to come out stronger and like take their revenge, but at the same time, like
you think like the therapy sessions you're gonna have to go through, like Sally from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like, girl, like, I hope you got insurance, baby, because yikes.
Yeah, it is definitely something. And then you think back on like how everything has evolved, and we talked about in your previous episode about like the different like genres coming out now. I know that one of my friends was really big into like, and I don't know if it's the correct term, so I'm going to put air quotes around it, like the torture porn type movies, like Hostel and stuff of that nature.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't know if I can really call it like, I mean, it's horror, like it's horrifying to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not in the vein of scary. Like it's not the horror that I would actively seek out to watch.
Yeah. When a lot of times when people think torture porn, they automatically go to Saw. Another one would be Vile. Vile is this movie where people basically have to fill a vial in the back of their head with this chemical to be granted access out of this locked room with basically a chemical that's secreted when they feel pain. So I would argue that the whole torture porn, I wouldn't know. Would you say it kind of trivializes violence? Like it makes it less impactful?
The only thing I could say is like I cringe at it, and I think it's like a lot of it's over the top. I've tried to like, and a lot of my experience with it comes from like watching the YouTube clips of here's all the crazy stuff that happened in Saw. So like I'll like watch those clips and I'll be like, I get where they're going with some of the messaging, like with certain characters, and you gotta like find the key, but it's in like all these like random needles, and
yeah.
But at the same time, there's like things where it's just over the top for the sake of being like over the top, and like what are we gonna do next time, and how are we gonna top this, and it's like it gets to the ridiculous rather than being based in something where it's like, okay, this is really scary.
also, after a while, especially with Saw, like I love the first Saw movie. After a while, I feel like Saw got to the point where it's like, how can we really up the ante to just be as unbelievable as the last scene? And a lot of the times, I think they were trying to sell tickets to Halloween Horror Nights. You have to remember, is like it became an attraction movie. I guess you could call torture porn movies are at home in the I guess you could say the abduction story, sort of. Like there's this really nasty, crazy movie, The Green Inferno. It's about a group of young people going out to protest an Amazon forest, and they end up getting brutalized and eaten alive by tribes people.
Right.
I think torture porn is more believable in settings that are natural. Like, do you really believe Jigsaw, who apparently was dying? I believe he was dying of cancer, and he was pretty up there, pretty old, had just this cornucopia of just torture chambers and everything else and disciples. I think torture porn usually is more believable when it's in settings beyond our control, or sort of removed from that realm of undeniability, if that makes sense.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
It does. It's just like there's another one where I'm thinking back, and it was like one of those. It was along. It's similar to the Green Inferno.
Cannibal Holocaust.
Where it's like, yes, that's the one.
Cannibal Holocaust is wild. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that one. That one's banned in a few countries, isn't it?
I believe so.
I remember I couldn't get in New Zealand.
Yeah, it was one that I remember when I worked at Blockbuster Video, we would have people come in and be like, "Oh, do you have this movie?" and we'd be like, "No." And
why are you looking for that?
Well, at the time, back in those days, like the internet was in its infancy, so it's hard to really like look things up. I mean, we figured out what it was, and it wasn't something that we would ever carry. But at the same time, just doing the research into what that movie was all about, it's so, I don't know, it's such a movie that it's very specific to an audience.
Yeah, and just the idea, again, it's just the idea of just being just abducted, almost, kind of like I feel like the concept of cannibalism is just inherently terrifying in its own right. Like you have this theme as well in things like House of a Thousand Corpses. It comes up again in even American Psycho. It's just the idea of being brutalized to the point of being just meat, and that sounds so visceral and disgusting, but it's true. Like in a sense, the cannibal myth, the cannibal storyline is being reduced to our most primal, fundamental origins of being animals, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that's the scariest idea of it, is the fact that we're not these clever crafting people. We're all just animals in the end. And that's a horrifying thought. That's where Texas Chainsaw Massacre, another really, really good one. I think that's also kind of where a lot of vampire myths get their bread and butter as well, is the idea that people are food. And of course, you have Hannibal Lecter, but he keeps coming up. I swear to God, I'm not obsessed with him, but just again, like this idea that there's no sophistication in the human race.
Now we've had an evolution of horror movies, going from the horror movies of like The Exorcist and The Omen and Rosemary's Baby and all of those movies, and we've had the Friday the 13th and the Nightmares and the Chucky's or Child's Play, and then we've started diverging into like a number of different genres, whether it's like the horror comedy or the horror where it's not horror, but like you like we talked about like with Bird Box, or the scent like Hush and Don't Breathe, where like you have your senses taken away and then you're like in this experience of, oh gosh, like are they going to be able to survive during like all of what's going on, and can they handle it?
Mhm.
And I'm trying to like figure out like what is the next evolution for horror movies? Like where is it going? Because I mean we've had Get Out, and we've had Us, and then we have movies like Midsummer, I
Oh, I love
believe, is
Midsummer.
another one. We have Hereditary, and we have Mother, and so we're getting into like these now really, I feel like you're
Art
getting into like these
housey?
really art
Yeah.
housey think pieces of horror movie.
Well, you have to understand also that to the 21st century audience member, we've seen everything. Like, I remember a long time ago, the big thing, well, not a long time ago, probably late 2000s, was the cursed child concept. Like, you have the remake of The Omen, you have Orphan, things like that. I think moving forward, you're going to see a lot of horror movies based on real issues. And they're not going to be blatant, as in, like, this is representative racism, but they're going to be coded in the sense that you have to really look at it. Like, a wonderful example, and I'm really glad you brought it up, is Us. I think Us is the perfect American horror movie, because not just because it's so easy to write it off because it's written and directed by a black director as a concept of racial critique, as you could say. But I believe Us is a movie about classism. I believe that Us is a movie that deals with the idea that there are people in the world who look like us but are treated as less than us because they're born below us. That you get the idea that people, the main character, lives in a society that's upper class, literally upper class, above ground level, and the clones live underneath them, lower class, and have to toil and fight to get up. And then you have just this idea that there's always class warfare. There's always just this clashing of people who look the same, act the same, but are always living in the shadow. I think moving forward, you're going to see a lot of, and again, coming out really, actually, it should be out, hopefully, by the time this airs, as Jordan Peele's Antebellum.
Okay.
Which is, again, going to examine race relations in the sense of slavery, stuff like that. But if you ever do get a chance and you can't stomach it, Us is a wonderful piece of media. Even though the critics kind of ate it alive, and that hurt my feelings a little bit. But yeah, I do think moving forward, you are going to see, again, and I'm glad you bring it up, Mother. The idea that women are starting to kind of challenge the masculine sort of headspaces and the very fabric of the home. You have movies like Hereditary, who again are challenging the family structure. You have the son, the daughter aspect constantly at war with the parent figures. I do think the next level in horror is going to be the not necessarily a political piece, but a political aspect towards it, or even a social aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Kevin Smith, and it's one of the few Kevin Smith movies that I've not watched, is something called Red State.
Ooh, I need to watch that.
Where the protagonists get caught up in I'm going off of like my limited knowledge of, they're basically trapped in a house or a cabin with people that are very conservative or over the top conservative. And
is this the one where they hunt them? I think.
I
no, that's
think
excuse
so.
me. That's the hunt.
Yeah, that's the hunt.
Excuse me.
Red State is
the hunt. I know is like a kind of examination of like radicalism. Like it's really good at examining both extreme lefts and extreme rights. It's a very interesting movie.
Yeah, I can't really explain Red State right now because it's a lot, but John Goodman's in it.
Oh, that'll sell you on it.
But apparently, I've heard good things. It's about them like the people versus the government, like government agencies, um, doing bad things.
Yeah. Also, like moving forward, I think you'll see a lot more of a lot more weird phone, like social media, cell phone movies. I've been seeing those so much lately.
Oh, I know that ones that I've seen are like Unfriend Me, or the ones where it's like
Unfriended.
they're they're all on like webcams and
Yeah.
they're not allowed to leave, and the dark web is watching them. And
Yeah. Like,
I've watched those. I've watched a few of those. Sometimes I will admit that sometimes I am cowardly and will like cover my eyes peeking out to watch them because I watch them by myself. But it is a genre that is almost akin to like the olden and I say olden, like the Blair Witch movies, of that found footage going on, and Cloverfield and stuff like that.
oh yeah, Cloverfield was really good. I did see the recent one. The recent one, that just Cloverfield Lane, I believe.
Yes, I watched that one.
Yeah, I believe like cell phone horror is kind of all of its own sort of thing, isn't it? Like there's like
I
when a
think it.
stranger calls. Arguably, even The Ring is kind of up there in
Mhm.
scary technology films.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely something where we're getting into that technology, and I don't know if we even talked about it on your previous episode, but like Black Mirror is there are some episodes of Black Mirror on Netflix where I'm watching it and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is getting to the point where things are real, because like things that are in the show are now things that are in real life." And I'm like, "Oh gosh, robot dogs that
Yeah.
could possibly track me down and kill me."
Oh my gosh, Black Mirror is terrifying. The one that really got me, that made me really disturbed, is the one where they go on the singing show.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, that one was really got me because it really examines the way that we treat our celebrities and the way that we kind of treat sensationalism, you know? The idea that you take people from their homes, their safe environment, put them on the stage, and then they're kind of forced to continue at their against their own will, basically. It's a
Mhm.
scary concept. Black Mirror is actually really cool in that aspect of kind of examining modern horror. It's kind of going to be one of the smarter ones you're going to find, because when I mentioned cell phone horror, I was thinking about the dumb ones. like like Countdown. Countdown is a movie where you download this app and it tells you when you're going to die. And at that point, you're just like, well, why don't you just don't download the app? Yeah, but no, Black Mirror is probably like the more intellectual one you're gonna find, and that's probably gonna be the piece of the genre that's gonna outlive the dumb one. Like, yeah, I believe Unfriended was the first movie to be filmed completely on Skype, too.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it's like the whole movie is completely told in a computer screen. I haven't seen Unfriended the Dark Web though.
I think I've seen it. I think I've seen that one, which it gets a little bit more fancier.
Ooh, does it? See,
Uh,
now I'm missing
yeah.
out. See, I watched Friend Request and that was hilarious. See, most people watch Eddie Murphy movies. I watch stuff I watch stuff like hashtag horror and like Unfriended, or Friend Request, excuse me. Friend Request is about this girl who, I guess, she kills herself and her soul becomes her Facebook profile and she gets mad at you if you unfriend her. So she comes in and kills you. Like, what a nightmare.
Wow.
Hmm.
Okay, so there's a lot of horror movies, and there's even like, because we just got a smart TV that where you can download different like smart TV
Oh
apps, and
goodness.
one of them I think is Shutter. Like Shutter's out
Oh,
there.
Shudder's fun.
um and you know there's a bajillion horror movies out there. What what ones would you be like, for like a good overall broad view of the genre or like selections? Like, what would be some of your spooky selections?
I have a ritual every Halloween. I watch. Well, it's not necessarily. See, this is so hard to determine what like a cult classic is. Like all the time, people are telling me, "Oh, it's a cult classic." Oh, the cult classic. Trick or Treat is wonderful for the Halloween season. All Hallows Eve, if you're really looking for that that little buzz. Of course, I have to recommend. Okay, it's really dumb, and I know a lot of people hate it, but I love Jennifer's Body.
I've heard that with Jennifer's Body, I've heard a lot of talk about it recently because I'm trying to think of who the actress is.
Megan Fox.
Megan Fox, because when Megan Fox did it, like a lot of people were poo-pooing on it back when it first came out.
Yeah.
But now there seems to be like this really like respect for the movie.
Well, because like the thing with Jennifer's Body, and the thing is like when I try and like defend it, it's because it's so much a piece of its time. Like that mid 2000s like high school, it was kind of the last one. It was the last high school murder spree we got. And it really examines this idea of femininity. And I know I keep harking back to that, but it examines this idea of like ownership of the female body. Ownership of the female body in the sense that Jennifer is either a token of evil or a token of her own agency. That's how I kind of always viewed it. And I think that's kind of why people are revisiting it, is because a lot of the times things that are geared toward teenagers and female girls kind of get swept under the rug as silly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of why people are kind of revisiting it now, is like, it's just kind of like, hey, let's examine this as an actual piece of media instead of like trash film. Mm-hmm.
So Jennifer's Body, you'd put up there.
Also,
and
a really, really good zombie movie that I feel like not a lot of people are talking about is Train to Busan.
I've heard of it.
It's not. You have to watch it with subtitles, honestly, but it's a wonderful movie that I really think some people would. It's South Korean, but it's a wonderful movie. A lot of the times I feel like foreign movies kind of get swept under the rug. Another one would be The Wailing, 2016, pretty cool. If you're into like we lightly touched on this, but I really liked The Witch. 2016's The Witch. If you're really into those art house sort of creepy films that are again slow burns.
Mm-hmm.
I just love like sort of gothic filmmaking, like the sort of like grayscale, very, very ominous, foreboding nature of certain films like that. And I actually liked It Follows. It Follows is a 2014 movie. It's this idea that the monster is a sexually transmitted disease. And each time you have sex with a person, a very strange person just starts following you. And you don't know what they want. And you don't know what happens when they get to you. So you have to pass on this curse via sexual intercourse. It's I swear to God, it's better than how I'm describing it. It's really cool.
That is a concept that like I was like, oh, that sounds really scary. And then I was tying it to Drag Me to Hell, where the person was trying to like pass off her curse to someone else, and that didn't work out for her, and so very sad.
Yeah, sorry. But I would, last but not least, I really want to plug a passion film of mine. It's Let the Right One In. It's a Swedish film. Well, it was released in 2008, but it's the perfect blend of horror and romance. It's a vampire story. It's about it explores this idea of childlike innocence as well as vampires. So it's a wonderful sort of recommendation, I feel.
And please watch it in the original Swedish dub. The English dub is a nightmare. And the remake that they did with Chloe Grace isn't a favorite of mine either. So, oh my gosh, I keep throwing in movies, but The Descent. The Descent
Ooh.
is terrifying. Holy. The Descent follows these miners, or they're rock climbers, who fall into a cavern. And the scariest thing for me is that woman was locked in a basement place with a woman who slept with her husband, and she didn't know. That's the scariest aspect of me, that there's a cheater in your mix and you just don't know.
That is one that I have watched, and there is definitely like I am not an outdoor person.
Same.
So just thinking of being trapped in like a cave system,
Mm-hmm.
let alone like everything else that happens in that movie, and it's a lot.
Well,
I'm like, no.
It's a perfect example of, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Like these people falling at almost unopportune times. It reminded me a bit of The Cube. The Cube is a movie where people wake up in a cube and they have to fight their way through horrendous torture machines and everything else. I just have a lot of torture movies that I can recommend you. Like, if you want to be absolutely disgusted and absolutely terrified beyond belief, please message me on Instagram. I will give you a laundry list.
Now, we're coming up like near our ending here, and you got some great recommendations, and we talked about like Xenomorph as your apex, and who you got as your like Pinhead, and the Cenobite as kind of like the cool thing. What is on the flip side? Like, what's your thing where you're just like, I can't believe they made a movie and had this as like the bad thing?
I'm really, really, really sick of shark movies. Like the first, a lot of what people don't understand is that the first big blockbuster movie was a horror movie. The Jaws was the first considered summer blockbuster movie, but I think I'm just sick of like animal horror stories in general. Like, I don't like Cujo.
Mm-hmm.
Like another big one I don't particularly care for are things like stuff like, I don't know, like stranded stories. Does that make sense?
It depends on like where you're going with the strand, like just stranded by themselves because they got themselves into it.
Like I don't know how to describe it. I guess I'm just tired of like wild animal stories is like my pet peeve.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that I have some people that do animal podcasts, and that's one of their things, is that they're tired of like the animals being made out to be bad or evil when the animal is just doing the animal thing. Now, granted, I mean, some of the stuff gets over the top, like Orca, or like where it's this shark that just won't stop coming, even though you would think that the shark would be like, okay, you know what, there's easier prey to go get. And
what's that movie with the two people in open water? That movie, that's a good example.
I don't think I saw Open Water. I did see like 47 Meters Down.
Oh, I haven't seen 47 Meters Down.
And that's where like, okay, there's sharks, and we gotta swim from the shark cage up to like the boat that's coming to rescue us or whatever. But I'm like, after a certain point of time, the sharks are gonna be like, eh.
You know what? I could be eating fish sticks right now. Like, this is this is ridiculous. But I think another genre that I'm kind of tired of is like the whole, like I just mentioned it, the whole like evil child movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was interesting with The Omen, but after a while, like there's one I recently watched. It's called The Hole in the Ground. Another one I just think it's kind of The Turning, things like that. The idea that the thing that there's just like evil children out to get you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it can be handled in an interesting way, but a lot of the times it's just like It sounds so horrible. It's just like, just kick him. You'll go away eventually. Yeah. I hope moving forward we see a lot more. I see a lot less of like the Damien Thorne archetypes.
Oh my goodness, that's funny. Just kick him.
Just kick him. He'll go away.
Just kick the evil
Just
child.
kick
See
him,
what happens.
except like if it's like in Brightburn. Okay, I admit that was kind of freaky. Brightburn was like the evil Superman, but yeah.
Yeah, I have not seen that.
Yeah, it's basically just like, what if it basically just entertains the idea of like, what if Clark Kent came down here and was like not nice.
Oh, evil Superman.
Oh, evil Superman, when will you learn?
When will you learn? Okay. Well, I definitely feel like we got more exploration about horror movies than we did in your last episode where we just smushed it in for like 20 or 30 minutes. I really enjoyed this. This was good.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too.
I've got a lot of like watching of things to do with my eyes covered, apparently, because there are definitely movies like when you recommend them and you put out what they are or like what they mean in like the horror context. It's I love watching movies and I love having things in my brain of like good stuff or being able to like analyze and have like in-depth cool conversations about it. And I feel like horror is one of those where I'm just not like it was never my thing. I get like creeped out by it. Like I can't watch the squicky stuff. I gotta cover my eyes. But at the same time, like I want to know more and be more involved than just reading Wikipedia pages about what is going on or watching YouTube clips.
Yeah. The wonderful thing about horror is that there's so many boundaries you can push. Like, and everything is horrifying. Like, we live in a world that is just perpetually scary. And I feel like the big thing with horror is bringing that to the forefront and just kind of taking the little aspects of life, like something as mundane as a drive down an unknown road or going to knock on your neighbor's door, or even recently going into an Uber. It flips it on its head and it makes you examine the scary things in life. And I think that's both terrifying and beautiful.
Oh my goodness. There was something I think I read it recently about like somebody created this whole like Uber storyline and they use like fake text messages and stuff to like craft this story as you're reading it, like you're reading text messages from people.
Yeah. Would that be considered an ARG?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
But it is definitely but you hear like the real stories of people that get into Ubers and have to like fling themselves out of the car when they start realizing that they're not going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Or they've been marked as, wait, why'd you mark me as being dropped off? I'm not dropped off. What?
Yeah.
Real life is scary, and people make real life movies now.
Yeah, just to kind of make us feel even worse about everything.
Well, Victoria, we're gonna wrap this up for now, but I feel like if I can watch some horror movies, we're gonna have more of a discussion.
Yes.
On this. But for people that have listened and they want to find you to discuss their horror movies, what are the best places to do so?
I have decided to take a break from Twitter, so I'm not gonna plug my Twitter anymore. Just cosplay spooky on Instagram. Hit me up if you want to talk. Hopefully by this point I will have my Chucky cosplay finished. Fingers crossed, future Victoria. I hope you're at least starting that. Instead of, focusing on Final Fantasy, but we'll see.
Crossing fingers.
Yes.
So definitely visit Victoria on Instagram. You'll get some spooky cosplay and you'll get some other cosplay, which it's all good. And then make sure that you listen to her previous episode, which will be linked in the show notes and on the Facebook page and website. So that way you have ease of access. And Victoria, I want to say thank you for coming back, not only to do an episode about horror movies, but doing it way ahead of time.
Spooky season is all year, my friend.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.